In New Zealand, a child is born every 8 minutes, and the first question we ask, is it a boy or a girl? What if it's neither?
A child is either male or female, it can't be in between.
What if it's intersex?
What's that?
You've never heard of it?
Nah, never heard of it at all.
What do you mean by intersex?
My parents were told that they couldn't tell what sex I was and that they should just take me home, dress me in yellow and green, give me a nickname, and wait to see.
When I was born, the midwife said, "Oh my God, it's a hermaphrodite." Well, to put it more correctly, I was born with what was called ambiguous genitals. The doctors decided I was a boy and my parents named me Bruce. A year later, they were told I was actually a girl. I became Margaret. And then at age 8, I had surgery to rearrange my genitals and make my body look more feminine. Now, I proudly identify as neither male nor female. Hi, my name's Marnie Mitchell, and I'm an intersex person.
Intersex refers to a person whose body is not the standard male or the standard female type. The term encompasses over 30 different conditions that all originate prenatally during a fetus's sexual development. Intersex may refer to somebody having genitals that are in between male and female. Or it might mean that somebody looks male on the outside, but on the inside is mostly female, or vice versa.
How common do you think that would be?
I wouldn't have thought it would be very common at all.
I'd say it'd be fairly rare.
How many babies are born with genitals that are so obviously in between male and female that a specialist team is called in? That would be about 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 2,000 children.
Is that right?
That's fairly substantial, isn't it?
More than 1 in 2,000, and that's a conservative estimate. That means that the total number of intersex people in New Zealand could be equal to the population of this place.
So what's it like to live in a world that has a binary male-female view of gender when you fit somewhere between the two? A world that has no awareness or appreciation of intersex. A world in which you are invisible. Why is this relatively common phenomena so unknown, so secret? I want to talk to some of the 2,000 plus New Zealanders who might be intersex. Some I already know, but very few are willing to reveal themselves on camera.
As a group, we have been trained to hide, to be ashamed of ourselves, ashamed of our difference.
I made the decision almost 20 years ago to be out and open about being intersex. And since then, I've met many people like myself. And while it's a difficult thing to talk about in New Zealand, around the world more and more intersexuals are now prepared to do just that. So come and see what it's like to grow up in an intersex body. Come and meet some of my people.
When I was born, my genitals didn't look very much like a boy's genitals. There was something a lot larger than a clitoris, but there was no pee hole in what they thought was the penis, and there was no testes, and what they might have thought of as the scrotum was all open in the middle.
I'm in California wine country to visit my dear friend, Beau Laurent. Beau was the very first other intersex person I was ever aware of.
When I was 1.5 years old, they figured out that I had pretty typical uterus and vagina. Then they told my parents that I was really a girl and not a boy, and then they removed my clitoris completely all the way to the inner parts. And they told my parents they should move to another town and never tell anybody where they went. They should change my name to one that sounds similar so that I won't notice the difference. And they should go through everything that they owned and get rid of every picture or letter or card that referenced the child who had the boy's name that was me.
Many intersexuals, or as they used to be known, hermaphrodites, are born with this kind of ambiguity of the genitals, an outward appearance that sits somewhere in between male and female. But though intersex births have been taking place forever, in recent times medicine has had the ability to surgically alter ambiguous genitals and render them invisible.
My old friend Tiger DeVore, believe it or not, when he was born there was some doubt whether he was male or female.
The genitals are basically open from what would have been the tip of the penis to what would have been the base of the testicles. And I had the first surgery to move all that mass of tissue into something that looked more like a penis at age 3 months. I had more than a dozen surgeries before I was 10. There was always a smell coming from my crotch, and I knew that I had infections a lot that hurt. And I have lots and lots of memories of speaking to my doctors and speaking to my parents and asking very pointed questions. Why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? They would say things like, you've got a leak, and we have to fix the leak. And other than that, everything's fine. And it was obvious to me this was more than just a leak, because there was no other person on the planet that had this thing going on with them.
My intersex condition is that I was born with ambiguous genitals and that everything was sort of pushed up inside and I couldn't pee properly.
This is Peter Trinkle, raised as a boy, but very early on he discovered that he was anything but.
I knew I'd sort of had some difference of the genitals from when I was 5 years old. My brother sort of pulled down my pants to show a neighborhood kid what I looked like down there. I think that my parents were probably told not to talk about it. But some strange things would come out. I remember once I was playing with something like sort of a girly toy. And my mom said, well, you're not supposed to play with girly toys. We're supposed to raise you as a boy. It's not because you're a boy, it's because we're supposed to raise you as a boy.
This model for dealing with intersex children was developed in the 1950s by a team at the world-renowned Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. That team was led by a brilliant young psychologist, Dr. John Money. Money was born in the small North Island town of Morrinsville.
Money's theory was that gender was mostly about nurture, about the way you're raised, that it's not about nature, whatever happened to you prenatally. He was using intersex to sort of prove that theory, and he was trying to show that as long as you made a child look typically male mostly, or typically female mostly, that you could end up with a straight boy or a straight girl who had no gender issues and no sexual orientation unusualness.
Hamburg, Germany, a long way from Baltimore, or for that matter Morrinsville. I'm here to talk to Mikkel Reiter, another who's grown up under the gaze of the medical profession.
I was born with a penis, so it was possible to assign me as male at birth. 2 weeks after birth, doctors told my parents, because the chromosomes are female, I have to be assigned female. Later, at about age 8, every half a year, I go to the hospital to widen the vagina. I had about 200 examinations in my life. I didn't want these examinations, but my mother took me there. I didn't trust her. I saw her collaborating with my enemies.
Jen Pagonis, raised as a girl, she only discovered at age 18 that she actually has XY, or male chromosomes.
When I was born, they didn't know anything at first. About a year later, I went to a normal checkup. That's when she noticed something was up with my vagina. And I was 1.5 then, and they removed the 2 gonads that I had in my stomach area. When I was 3, they decided to remove my clitoris because it was too big by their standards for a normal girl. They claimed that they were going to preserve the function and the feeling, but in reality, it was all about appearance, and they kind of just hacked away at it until it was out of sight and out of mind. The doctors were people coming out of the John Money school of thought and way of dealing with bodies that don't fit into the category of normal.
But as early as the 1950s, there was at least one dissenting voice, Professor Milton Diamond of the University of Hawaii. He didn't believe that intersex people were the perfect proving ground for Money's theory that gender was largely learnt.
When Dr. Money came along with his ideas, they seemed to resonate mostly with the medical community. So while the rest of the academic world still argued nature, nurture, the medical world didn't. They just accepted that.
There was this real authoritativeness about this is what we do for these children.
Around America and around the world, this medical solution for dealing with intersex births soon became the standard treatment.
I'm in Chicago to talk to Linnell Stephanie Long, born to a poor South Side family in 1963.
The urethra was at the bottom of the penis, and instead of having a scrotum sac, it was open like a vulva. And they said, voila, here's your baby boy. My mother had 6 sons, including me. And all of my brothers, they were rough and tough, and they fell down, and they would jump back up. I fell down, I'd sit there and cry like a little girl, because that's what I was. I wanted to be a normal boy. I didn't want what I was called at school, which was a freak. I was maybe like 12 years old, and me and my mom, we went grocery shopping, and this little girl, like kids do, they ask you, are you a boy or a girl? I just let them assume what they wanted to think. But my mom, this is my son, you know, and she got disgusted, and then she told me from then on I had to act more masculine. You don't be a little wimp in the black community. You can get beat up, you can get hurt. You have to present this air of, don't mess with me. My air was like, ooh, you know.
So I went off to the junior high school at the age of 12. I didn't last very long. I became extremely nervous going to the locker room. I mean, this is in the days when you had to sort of undress and march through the showers and everything. And I noticed I had sort of the smallest penis in the whole place out of 100 guys undressing.
I was trained from a very, very young age never to tell anybody about what was happening during the summer. I had to go along with an agreed-to fabrication about what vacation we went on, when in fact I was in the hospital for 6 to 10 weeks at a time. So I knew pretty quick that this wasn't something I could discuss with anybody. Because of the way that they make the urethra, which is the hole that you pee through, in between surgeries, I would have to keep that open with a dilator. And I wasn't able to do that myself, so my mom had to do that for me. Otherwise, I would have had to have been in the doctor's office every day to have somebody, you know, putting this steel rod into my penis. So, you know, uncomfortable stuff for a little kid.
Growing up with shame and secrecy can have other, more tragic consequences.
If my mother ever saw this film, this is the time she should turn the television off. I was abused by more than one person, most profoundly from about the age of 10 or 11. And that a feature of that abuse was my difference. Although I was being raised as a male, I was dressed as a female, and I was abused as a female. Photographs were taken of me, and an important aspect of that photography was that difference about me.
Sexual abuse, sadly, is a common theme amongst intersex children. It was a traumatic part of my early life, and that too of my old friend David Vandertye.
I think of it as I was caught by a pedophile ring. Violent, sexual, sadistic abuse.
It's one of the awful products of growing up with shame and secrecy that intersex children often fall victim to sexual predators.
In the situation I was born to, there would have been abuse, regardless. I also believe that that was a part of it, that I was something more interesting, more valuable about my body to people.
The secrecy, along with the surgeries, continue for many into teenage years and beyond.
Around the age of 11, they said, "We noticed your vaginal opening is a little bit smaller than normal. We're just going to make a little incision and make it a little bit bigger so that you could have normal sex with your husband when you're older. And only a doctor's eye could tell that you're different than any other woman." I started having sex with my boyfriend when I was 16. It took like 3 months for his penis to go inside of me. And when it did, it really hurt, and it ended up tearing me open like every time. But I still thought it was like all my fault. Like I thought I was doing something wrong during sex, and that one day this orgasm was gonna happen. I just had to get through this like painful stage, because like the doctor said, I would have normal sex with my husband, and I just really believed them. I often would have dreams of cutting it all off, like cutting my skin off or just cutting my vagina off, just not wanting to be a part of my body. I feel like the inside is totally different than like what is on the outside.
As more surgeries became necessary, I remember my parents questioning the physicians very carefully and saying, well, why is this necessary? What happened with the last one? And of course, they have lots of big words to explain why what they did didn't work. Well, there's been so many surgeries and it's the same suture line. You have to look at the fact that we're working in a very small area with not that much tissue, and we could import more tissue into the area, but of course then we always risk sloughing. Parents are listening to this. They're hearing this doctor say, your kid's not okay and he's not going to be okay unless you let us do more stuff.
It would seem the prospect of a child without obviously male or obviously female genitals was just too much to handle. But what of the people who escape this treatment? They do exist.
My mother kind of let it slip once that when you were born, they didn't know if you were a girl or a boy. And she giggled. My father's a medical doctor. What they told him would be different from your average parent. I never heard anything about there being anything wrong with me. So no, I have not had any treatment. I was changing with one of my best friends to go swimming, and I dropped something and I ended up, down by her genitals, and I saw them and I thought, why are hers flat? She's missing something.
I first became aware that I was different when my brother was born. Why did he look different than me? When my parents started to explain, it wasn't that he was different, it was that I was different. I had what was either a tiny penis or a very big clit, and no sign of a vagina, and no testicles. They weren't really sure what sex I was. My parents would never have consented to exploratory surgery. It was very plain that I identified as a boy, and when other people saw me, they always said, "How's your little boy?" or "What a cute little boy you have." And so my parents raised me as a boy. I did not live a horrible childhood at all. I used to tell my friends that I was like Superman. I had fallen from space and they couldn't tell anybody about it, and then I'd drop my pants and prove it to them.
My mom had a amniocentesis. They said it was a foolproof test, so they knew that she was having a boy. When I came out, they were like, "Oh, our bad, you had a girl."
Officer Danny Lee Harris of the Atlanta Police Department.
My first girlfriend, she said, your clitoris is extremely big for a female. I said, "Okay, well, I'm just bigger than you." She was like, "No, you need to go to the doctor and find out why, number one, you don't have a menstrual cycle. Number two, why your clitoris is so big." And because of that is what actually started me on my process of finding out that I was indeed intersex. I was working a job over at the local hotel, and a gentleman came up to me and said, "Sir, ma'am, what are you?" But I was just like, "It's whatever you want me to be."
It was after sleeping with a few different women that I realized, wow, I am doing things here that girls are not supposed to be able to do. The clitoris is the only organ on the human body that's specific purpose is pleasure. It follows that having a large clitoris is just a very positive thing.
So medicine has been able to make intersex children disappear, surgically conforming us to male or female. The theory was that if it was all kept completely secret from the child, they would grow up and be okay. Well, the reality for many of us is it wasn't okay.
I got my medical records. She handed me these 3 pages that said I was a true hermaphrodite and that my parents had a son who was named Brian, that he was born on my birthday at my address, and then his name is just crossed out. And I was filled with shame, and I was having really a complete emotional breakdown.
I went into a really pretty profound depression, a real dark night of like intense questioning. Like, what is wrong with me? And one night, everything fell apart. And I was drinking beer somewhere, and I just fell apart, and I was crying. But I thought, oh, I have to do something, I have to do something.
I actually came to the conclusion I'm gonna kill myself. I was gonna use a straight razor, and I remember thinking about how I was gonna cut and where in order to be most certain that I would be successful while being able to do it with the least suffering. And then I remember thinking, man, I am really pissed. If I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna find the surgeon, I'm gonna kill myself in front of him. That's when the moment I realized, oh, the thing that's causing me to have such a miserable life is not the clitorectomy, it's the shame. And that's wrong. Whatever body I was born with can't be shameful. I thought, I want to figure out how to heal myself and how to have a life that's worth living. I was able to publish a letter in a magazine called The Sciences that announced that I had started a support and advocacy group called Intersex Society of North America, although at that moment, all I had was a P.O. box.
I stop at a little tiny grocery store, and there's a copy of The Sciences magazine. Open it up, and I close it, and I go, oh my God, there are other people.
Pretty soon, people were writing, and not long after that, I would often call them, and pretty soon I had a headphone because I'd be on the phone for hours with people, and every one of them said I never thought I would ever hear from or meet or read about another person like me. You remember we took those photographs?
Bo decided that it would be incredibly healing for a bunch of intersex people to meet up, to share their stories and experiences. So she sent out an invitation, and one even made it all the way to New Zealand.
Here we are at the first ever International World Intersex meeting. Woo! How does it feel to be here, Mani?
It feels absolutely incredible to have come all the way from New Zealand for the feast. I owe her a huge debt of gratitude. I don't think I would still be here on planet Earth if it wasn't for Bo.
I thought when I heard there was an intersex retreat that I was going to meet all these other people with similarly different bodies. And we could discuss, wow, what was it like with you? Did you have this experience? And did you have that experience? And, you know, what is it like with you dating and sexually? And what I found was that these people were traumatized.
I just want to get a dull, rusty knife and start hacking off other doctors' genitals and say, here, you son of a bitch, how do you think it feels?
It was like, you know, wading into a war zone. People treated me like a freak. They lied to me. They cut me up. They harmed me in ways that prevent me from being romantically or sexually intimate with people. They caused me to feel like my body is disgusting. People would refer to their genitals as the genitals.
To have had your most sensitive, vulnerable, private organs mutilated. I used to feel survivor guilt when I first met others in the community. Now I just feel really blessed that I don't have that. I think it's like the greatest gift my parents ever gave me.
That gathering was really the start for me and many others in realising that we'd been treated poorly. We were part of a generation of children who had been surgically and hormonally assigned to fit neatly into male or female, a generation who were left traumatised and damaged.
The problem with money's system is that when it went out into the world, a lot of people had their genitals surgically altered in ways that left them with pain, with incontinence, with reduced sexual sensation, with all sorts of problems, and very rarely with normal-looking genitals.
I'm very angry at the genitals that were taken away from me. Very angry at how much good sensation was taken away from me. I would like to have had a whole lot more say over the body I would have had, the life I would have had, the identity I would have had.
You will not create a happy, quote-unquote, normal child by mutilating their genitals. That is not what will happen.
I think it's very likely there are people out there who are glad that they were treated according to the system that Money and his colleagues developed. But if they're out there, I haven't met them.
You know, if I went around and said, open heart surgery is a sham and nobody should do it anymore, we should just stop, a whole bunch of people would come out and say, well, actually, open heart surgery saved me, and I think we should not stop. But that hasn't been happening around genital surgery.
But what's most amazing to me is how long Money's system has dominated and how doctors all over the world have dealt with intersex births. And despite the fact that the medical model has been largely discredited, hospital practices have been slow to change.
Still in the United States, like about 5 non-consensual surgeries done each day on intersex children.
Of course, part of it is that it continues to provide a solution to what is considered a very difficult situation. What do you do when you can't answer the question, is it a boy or a girl?
When parents have a newborn intersex kid, they're told their kid has a deformity of the genitals. Those are the words that are used. And then the doctor comes in and says, this is easy to fix, 1 or 2 surgeries, kid will never know. So, of course, nervous, frightened young parents of an infant are going to say, absolutely, do the surgery as soon as possible.
We can take your hermaphrodite child, guess what they would have been if they weren't what they are, and then turn them into something they're not so that it's easier for you. It's a ripoff.
So, what should happen when an intersex baby is born?
You have a healthy intersex child. Congratulations. The kid's going to be okay. And when it comes time, the kid will be able to get educated and make a choice about what kind of surgeries they want to have or not have any surgeries at all. If necessary, we can manipulate their hormones, but they may not have to have their hormones manipulated to puberty. They'll just grow and be fine and have the identity of their own choice. That's what should be happening. That's the truth. That's what's healthy. That's what's real. That's what's natural.
Unfortunately, not the experience of most intersex people. The pressure to conform continues throughout life.
As a teenager, I stopped growing. My mom wanted to take me to a new gender clinic, and it was an absolute nightmare. They said that they had assigned me the wrong sex because there was no way that I could live a normal, healthy life with the genitals I have, and they couldn't make me decent male ones. And it would have been much easier to make me a girl than it would have been to make me a boy, and now I was nothing. I was literally told this. I was 14 years old. They said, you're not male, you're not female, and that's all there is in this world is male and female. You're nothing.
The first shaming words I ever had around being intersex was at 20 years old. One gynecologist I saw looked at me with very bigoted, beady eyes and said, can I ask you a personal question? I said, yeah. And she said, has your clitoris always been this large? And I said, yeah, as long as I can remember. And she said, well, I'd like to run some tests because this is not normal. And I was like, well, what do you mean? I'm not sick or anything. And she's like, well, no. And I was like, why do I have to do this? And she's like, well, you don't have to, but I just, you know, it's very... And I was like, I'm out of here.
The idea was that I could not live an adult life without a set of genitals that looked absolutely male. Why? Well, you can't go into men's bathrooms. What do you mean I can't go into men's bathrooms? I've been going to men's bathrooms all my life. Oh, you can't stand at a urinal. I got news for you. Any man with a pot belly that hangs over his cock has to sit to pee. Being able to stand to pee is not a guarantee of having a fully formed, normal-sized penis.
A lot of intersex people are born with no visible difference of the genitals. They grow up without any idea until puberty. But for them too, there is pressure to have their bodies conform.
When I was 15, I had been physically developed for quite some time, but had never begun to menstruate. My mother and I became concerned and decided I should go to a doctor and just make sure everything was okay.
They assumed that my hymen had closed so that I was menstruating and that the blood wasn't coming out and that was causing the pain. So they went in and that was my first surgery.
It was when they attempted to cut my hymen that they realized that I didn't have a hymen or a vagina, and that's how I found out.
I was then told that I would have to have surgery so that I could have a normal sex life with my husband when I got married. And I had my vaginal reconstructive surgery when I was 15. My friends were all told that I was going on vacation, so I didn't have anybody come visit me. I laid in the hospital for 17 days with things stuck in me. They took all the skin off of my butt and wrapped it around a mold and inserted it inside of me to create a vagina. And then people would come in and sort of check it and poke and prod, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night and there was a strange man under my sheets. I was like, who are you? He said, oh, you know, I'm the podiatrist. I was just curious. So, a podiatrist? I mean, you know.
Meet Gavin Coleman, born with an extra X chromosome, a condition called Klinefelter syndrome.
I don't produce enough testosterone naturally in my body.
Did I say intersex yet? Did I?
We've got generally small testes and sparse body hair. You know, we don't grow very much facial hair. I didn't need to shave till I was 26. It's great. I didn't hit puberty. There was nothing happening with me. I had to watch everybody else basically doing what it said in the biology book that they'd be doing. But of course, what was it saying I was doing? There was no explanation. Basically, they were looking at my body and going, well, apart from him having small balls and a small penis, looks like a normal boy to me. But I was growing breasts. I mean, they were quite small, but they were visible and sticking out on a side view. I was getting bullied and slagged. That was the worst part of it, really, you know, having to listen to other people telling you what you are and you're not even sure what the hell you are. And I'm thinking, maybe I am a girl because I certainly don't feel like a guy. I think a lot of intersex people are not sexually active. To share our body that we're not comfortable with somebody else is really a nightmare. It's scary as hell and you just don't want to risk the rejection.
I got married to a girl just like my mother because that's what every man wants, to marry someone like Mom. And it was the worst relationship of my life. All I knew was I was a guy that was effeminate with a small penis. But I didn't want to be naked in front of anyone, you know, sex with the lights off.
I understand these difficulties. For me, I haven't had a loving relationship. After all, I was a child being told that my body was so horrendous and so not okay it had to have pieces cut off it.
People get labeled and dumped into, like, sort of the faggot bag. That's where a guy who doesn't sort of, conform to sort of traditional notions of masculinity must be gay because of their nonconformity. And I got put in that bag. That was a very painful place to be in. My orientation is heterosexual. In other words, in my fantasy world, I think about women. When I was like 19, 20, I tried dating a few times. And it usually went nowhere because, they sort of see my difference and I'd freeze up and stare at the ceiling. And it was like a disaster. I basically sort of became asexual in the face of all of this. I'm an elderly guy, unmarried, sort of outside the mainstream, and I'm still read as gay. That's what's going to happen in my lifetime, is I'm going to be seen as a repressed gay person.
For those that confuse the boundaries between the sexes, the consequences can be severe. Sally Gross grew up in apartheid South Africa as Selwyn, a boy who was oblivious to how his genitals might be different to others.
I had some sense that something was awry, though I had no sense that it was to do with plumbing. Puberty was kind of confusing. My expectation was that I'd develop some kind of orientation, an attraction of some kind. No, I was asexual. I'm simply wired differently.
As one of nature's celibates, Selwyn gravitated towards religious life, and by the age of 34 had been ordained into the Catholic Order of Dominican priests.
My genitalia are about as radically ambiguous as you can actually get. And it says a great deal about my own kind of naivety and lack of curiosity that this was a penny which did not drop until I was actually in my 40s. If people didn't know me, they'd sometimes certainly take me for a woman. Some of the children in the congregation were not persuaded that father was actually male. I knew that there was an issue of kind of gender and bodiliness. I didn't know exactly what it was, so I determined to take kind of advice. And I was advised to live experimentally in female role. I didn't like the process of having to learn to put on makeup. In a sense, presenting as female did less violence to me than did presenting as male. But the truth is, I'm a person. I'm me.
This all proved too much for the Dominicans. Selwyn was eventually pushed out of the order.
My name is Max, and I'm really looking forward to the day when a child is born. People put a sign on the front lawn that says it's a baby instead of it's a boy or it's a girl.
Another one of the close friends I met at the first gathering of intersex people was Max Beck.
I looked up at this person, she looked back at me, and I thought, oh dear, pretty much love at first sight. Max at the time was Judy and was living as a woman. I was appalled that she thought this would really have any impact whatsoever on how I felt about her. But she'd sort of been her whole life led to believe that this was not something that could ever be discussed. Doctors had assigned her female. She'd had a series of surgeries and hormonal interventions to make her into a girl, essentially. And Max was always very male-identified, so dressed more like a guy, did more guy-like things, took up space in a room the way a man would. Ultimately started seeing a new endocrinologist who, on a first visit, said, so what's it going to be, estrogen or testosterone? Because you have to take something for your bones and for your heart. And that was really the first time that Max was ever offered a choice. Because estrogens had been such a wretched experience, he thought, try testosterone. Why not? When Max had to renew his driver's license, the clerk took one look at Max and looked at the license and decided some hideous clerical error had been made and just changed it to male. So we were very excited when he came out and looked at it and said, I'm a boy. We got married in the middle of my pregnancy with Alder.
There's Daddy. He's reading me a story.
Max really was my other half. He was my soulmate. And I was so lucky to have him for the time that I did. Well, Max died of cancer in January of 2008. And it actually was a vaginal cancer, which was really complicated in terms of his treatment because men don't get vaginal cancer. So it was about a 3-year battle. And of course, we'd had our second child about 2 months after his diagnosis. He tried very hard to be optimistic. You know, he really wanted Griffin to remember him, and he really wanted to be there for Alder. I was always so proud when I would see him with my kids, because he was, without a question, the best father I ever saw. When Max found out that he was actually dying, that was the first thing he said. I just wanted my little boy to remember me.
So much of what I see reflected in the lives of intersex people is the effect of intolerance of difference. I fantasize about what life would be like if intersex was treated just the way it should be, like no big deal. Many intersex people have gravitated towards a place where they can be themselves. Probably the most open and accepting city in the world, San Francisco. I love it here. I love being able to be queer and...
You're not queer. You're normal for San Francisco. Republicans are queer.
Exactly. My great friends, David and Peter, gay man on the left, intersex person on the right. In San Francisco, they're just an old married couple.
He's the love of my life. We met in March of 1978 at a bisexual potluck in Sunnyvale, California. He was 28, and he had these gorgeous brown eyes. Next thing I knew, he was sitting next to me, and we're making out in a circle.
We started dating each other, and here we are, 31 years later.
You know, people are just really cool with it here. I mean, I think this is the city of exploration, right? It's the most progressive city in the country. If you can't do it here, you can't do it anywhere in the country, right? This is the place when I was really passing as a boy, right, and people couldn't tell what I was. This is where it was totally okay. I mean, even if I drive an hour out of the city, then suddenly it would not be okay. But this is where really people are like, well, maybe they're a transgendered person.
One of the other intersex people I met on that first trip to America was Suji. She and her partner Anne find the San Francisco attitude easy to live with.
A lot of people are willing to say, well, I think those are two lesbians, but I'm not sure, and, well, it's none of my business. You know, so I think living where we live, we get a lot of room.
Yeah, as long as you're putting your recycling in the right containers and not smoking, it's good.
Suji was the queen of street patrol. That was the official title. I was very impressed.
She thought it was cool.
Yeah.
I think she still does.
You just said to me, you should know, I'm not exactly a man and I'm not exactly a woman, and that didn't really even make a wave in my world. I was just like, okay, that's, you know. And I don't love Suji because she's intersex, and I don't love Suji in spite of the fact that she's intersex. Suji's just an extraordinary person, and I feel very, very grateful to have met her. And I joke sometimes I have to look real good when I go to Suji's work because I want all the nurses that are after her to know that, you know, that she has a wife. When I talk to the kids, I talk about your dad and he. But they hear me all the time talk to other people about Suji, she. I'll know somebody sometimes for a while, and they think there's two people out there, my partner and the kid's dad. Yeah. Finally, they'll say, what? Who are these two people? And I'll say, oh, no, it's just Suji.
No. But then, of course, it is possible for intersex people to find love and happiness, no matter where they live.
After my divorce, and such a mess, and I just was sure I would never, ever love another man as long as I lived. But there was something about David that was different. I just had a sense there was some energy that was different. When he first told me, my very first thought was, oh, shit. You know, I just fall in love with somebody, and then I find out he can't have sex. And then my brain said, well, no, that can't be true, because he's had girlfriends. Now, they must have been doing something. When you love someone, it doesn't make any difference what their anatomy might be. It was just so clear that it didn't make any difference at all.
I've never been single for any appreciable amount of time in my life. I noticed that there was a gay nudist group in Rochester. I went. I got picked up. Being different does not make people run away with revulsion. They will ask you questions, and this is a bad thing. You get the spotlight, you get a microphone. Are you kidding? This is wonderful. This is the best thing that could happen to you.
I suppose what it's really about is being comfortable in your own skin.
When I was 44 years old, I started to have urinary problems. All I knew was I felt like something was tearing. I went into my doctor, and that's when I learned that I was actually XX, not XY. That I wasn't a partially developed male, I was an overdeveloped female. Age was separating a bifid scrotum, revealing that I actually had a vagina that was totally closed over. I wasn't a man missing testicles. I was a man with a vagina.
One of the other places that intersex people can be out and open is the internet. The anonymity of cyberspace has led to an explosion of intersex material. Type the word intersex into Google and you get hundreds of thousands of results. Many of these are support groups and forums where intersex people can talk to each other.
When I had my surgery, they told me I would never meet another woman such as myself. Now I correspond with hundreds of women every week. The people that have taught me the most are the people that I've met from the support groups. They have not been the doctors, they have not been the experts, but they have been people who have lived through the same thing that I have.
It's almost a universal experience of intersex people that they think that they are the only person with this thing that ever existed. What the internet has done is given us access to each other.
YouTube started because I thought that this is the perfect way for me to express myself.
Hello and welcome to Intersex News, yes.
I've posted more than 1,300 videos in 2.5 year period. Most are to the absolute maximum mark that I can go to, which is 11 minutes, even though they state you can only have a 10-minute video. Well, actually, you can have an 11-minute video. YouTube is a platform for me to reach out to a possible entire world. It's a diary, and it's a risky diary because I have been very open on myself. Telling people is important.
Get on it, guys. Let's get together on it. Let's really get intersex spread across the world.
I'm using my big mouth to essentially destroy my life in ways, but actually I'm okay in this world. Yeah, I have issues with my genital size. What man doesn't have a situation going on in their head about the size of their members down below? You know? Every man, doesn't matter what size it is, they're still gonna think, oh, it's not big enough, you know? But I help people who think they've got small penises. I go, that's a small penis.
There's more to being a man or a woman than just a genital. People have genitals. People are not genitals.
I love being intersex. I just wish they didn't fuck with my body so much.
We have created this cycle of, oh my God, we have to fix it, shame it, hide it, and then there's another intersex birth. You've never talked about the one that might be your neighbor.
Sorry, society, because it would have been so simple if it was just male and female, but you're gonna have to change your mind now.
Intersexuality is the most common congenital difference. It's going to be here, and we're going to have to deal with it.
It's about down there. We're not allowed to have anything different down there.
Being intersex has been, honestly, a gift for me.
It doesn't suck to be intersexed. It sucks to be persecuted.
I am different because I was born different. And you were different because you was born different.
Intersex isn't uncommon, it's just unheard of.
So now you've met some of my little tribe. Yes, we've got something different between our legs, but we're really just people. We live in houses, go to work, we have friends and family, hopes and dreams. We are people, just like you.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.